On today's episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities,
what we really are looking for is being pure to yourself, being real about the world, seeing that we don't even know what normal is. And if we don't even know what normal is, how in the world do we have the audacity to call anybody abnormal?
I saw the psychiatrists, all they did, they met for 10, 15 minutes. They gave diagnoses and they wrote prescriptions. And I was like, where's the therapy? Where's the talking? Where's the helping people not feel alone in their suffering? Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you today with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, alternative perspectives on mental health. And I'm excited for our conversation today. I have with me Dr. Fred Moss. He is a board-certified psychiatrist with over 45 years of experience who's on a mission to change how we think about mental health. After working with more than 30,000 patients, he's stepped away from the traditional model of labels and medication to focus on something more human: connection, communication, and helping people find their true voice. He's the author of Creative 8 and Find Your True Voice, and a seasonal podcast host. Dr. Fred is also a global speaker who spoke on stages, events, and conferences. He's also been a guest on over 300 podcasts, sharing a refreshing, honest take on what it really means to heal. Welcome, Dr. Fred.
No, thank you for having me. I look forward to our conversation very much.
Yes. I think we already are starting off on a similar page because we are challenging the paradigm. But first, I would like to hear a little bit more about you and how you even came to get into this field. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, sure. So, I was born to be a healer, really, actually, looking right back to that very day. I was born to a family in chaos and disarray. I had two older brothers. They were 10 and 14 when I was born, and or almost 10 and almost 14. And, there was chaos and conflict. And my job was to be a rolling bundle of joy and to bring unity and peace and freedom into that family. And my brothers told me that I did a pretty good job for at least a couple years, not continuously, but at least a couple years before I started causing my own level of damage. And I really saw communication. I really remember being in my playpen in the living room and watching my parents and my brothers talk to each other, like communicate with each other, and wishing someday that I could do that. I look up, just like you're looking at me now, I can sort of see myself looking up from the playpen and just saying, when I get to be a big boy, I'm going to be a communicator too. And I expected, I was precocious because I had these brothers just feed me all the information about, sex and drugs and rock and roll. I knew things going into kindergarten that most of my peers had never even heard of. And so I knew a little bit about math and a little bit about reading and a little bit about writing and a little bit about, Jimi Hendrix, a little bit about a lot of different things. And so I talked a lot in elementary school, and I thought that was communicating. I was funny, I was smart, I was tall, I was left-handed, I was cute. I had all those things going for me. And so, but what I really learned, unfortunately, was that school wasn't the place that was going to teach me how to communicate. And certainly not in the classroom. In the classroom, I was told so many times to sit down, be quiet, do what I say, now, all that. And it was just squashing over and over again. So I was like, wow, this is sad. It's sad, but I'm going to still communicate. You're going to have to deal with me. There's no elementary school teacher who forgot having me as a student. I promise that. And I just went through the entire elementary school thinking, well, maybe next, these people learned it somewhere, but maybe junior high. And then junior high was even more disappointing. And then high school, of course, was even more disappointing. And I began to skip class and really see that it was just a bunch of bunk in school. And because I could see that communication was what I needed more than anything. Nevertheless, I had heard great things about this school that was only 40 minutes away. We'd spent our whole, conventional, like pre-high school days trying to get into the University of Michigan. And indeed, I got into the University of Michigan as a freshman and went into the engineering school because I had these amazing math scores. Not because I wanted to be an engineer at all. It's just that I wanted to be on Ann Arbor's campus, and that was how to get there. So I got on the campus, and I stayed in engineering for like a year and a half, and finally realized that this is not for me. I'm not going to be able to do this. And I dropped out and got on a bus and went to Berkeley, California from Detroit, and, figure out what my life was about. Like, that's what I was there. It was a good summer. And I figured out whatever I figured out, but it was unsustainable. And there was this new technology that my mom told me about, that, and my brothers as well. I had a younger sister by now, and they thought I would have the aptitude for it. You might have heard of the technology. It's actually called computers. And it was like, yeah, I can do computers. Let's see. And back to Michigan I went to work on the only basically the only computer in Michigan, which was at the University of Michigan. And back on I was, Fortran and COBOL, and, like the computer building was a 2-acre facility for the main computer. And it was like, okay. I did that for a short period of time and also realized, no, that's not going to be it either. So I dropped out again, went back to California. And this time my mom told me that I would, have to get a job. And it's like, whatever. So she applied for some jobs for me in the state mental health facility, or actually the state civil service facilities. And I got 2 applications in, one for the unemployment office and one for child care worker 3B. Or child care worker 3 at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And I took that second job because it had 3 weeks of an orientation. And I figured I could orient. I could definitely do that for 3 solid full-time weeks, take 3 paychecks, buy myself a car, and get the hell out of here. Like, I got stuff to do. I got to go learn how to communicate somewhere. But 3 paychecks will come in handy. And so that's what I did, is I took the job expecting to stay exactly 3 weeks. And on the 4th week, that Monday, my friend Paul, who later became a pretty close friend, convinced me to go up to the floors where the boys were. And I went up there with him, white knuckled it through the day, made it through that Monday, and then started like somehow deciding maybe 3 more weeks. I'll get a later model car, still can travel around the country. So I stayed on for like 3 more weeks learning the job. But in the meantime, I started to become a little bit proficient. Like, all of a sudden I was communicating and getting paid for it. Like, all of a sudden, all I had to do was treat these kids like they were humans. That was fantastic. And that's what I did. And, it grew on me. And then I thought, okay, 3 more weeks. And, to tell you the honest truth, I've been, for 46 years, I've been waiting for those 3 weeks to come. And I live in 3-week segments pretty much. Always like, I'm going to quit in 3 weeks. I'm going to quit in 3 weeks. And then 46 years later, here I was still. And, I could see the vision. I could see the writing on the wall of the future of psychiatry and couldn't stand it. I hated it. I really hated what was happening in psychiatry when I was at that Fairlawn Center. Jimmy and Johnny would get into a tussle, and the psychiatrist would call them, and they'd come down and talk to Jimmy for 4 seconds, and then talk to us for like 6 seconds, and then go to the nursing station and write something in a chart. And then we'd have to go to retrieve the child and hold them down in the quiet room and get them, packed full of some injectable cocktail that would leave him in a stupor or a comatose or something. And then we would write that it was successful. I was like, what is that? It's just so insane and barbaric. And it's, of course, still going on to this very day. People think I'm talking about something ancient. I'm not. I'm talking about something today, hundreds of times in this country that has happened today already. And, it's just like, I can't handle that part of it. So I'm going to go in as a hero complex, and I'm going to come in. My brother, 14 years older than me, was already a psychiatrist. I'm going to go in and be a psychiatrist as well. And I'm going to change the system by by reminding people that communication is the center of all healing. And that's why I went in. I went in a 3rd time, finished my undergraduate degree, got accepted in all sorts of magical ways to Northwestern University Medical School in Chicago, Illinois, downtown. And again, there I learned how to communicate in Chicago, not in medical school at all. I learned how to communicate. I love Chicago. I had a great time. I arrived the same year Michael Jordan did, so I was able to really enjoy early basketball in Chicago. And then I graduated, and then got my child and adolescent fellowship, and boom, released. And by that time, in fact, there's been so much changes in the primary conventional psychiatry system, because Prozac had been introduced in 1987, and that changed everything. Everything changed with Prozac, everything. That's when biological psychiatry was introduced to the world. That's when the whole idea of chemical imbalance was introduced to the world. That those things are made up, and they were made up then, but I was not, I was on board to at least listen and consider being a proponent, an ambassador. But, before too long, I realized that it wasn't working in the way that they said it was. And I was left being duplicitous for many years, like actually knowing that I had a better way to do things than what was people were asking for, what I was being asked to provide in the world of diagnoses and medications. And so kind of hiding behind trees and bringing in communication when I could, like, yeah, don't forget, like that, like, and still nevertheless learning how to be a pretty significant diagnostician and a pretty significant psychopharmacologist, like, 100,000 prescriptions at least, and 30,000 patients over the next several years. And eventually it broke down, though. Eventually I couldn't live the dual life. And so I started doing something in 2006, which most people thought was radical, but to me, it just seemed very sensible. And that was taking a handful of people off of their medicine, with their permission, of course, and watching what happened when people come off a medicine they thought they needed. And what happened is reliably, predictably, and profoundly, people got way better off their medicine, like way better. Like their diagnosis disappeared. Like it was like, wow, and it happened a couple hundred times. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this information? I can scream it from the mountaintops, like, stuff is making you worse. And I tried that for a while, but violence doesn't really work. So I had to water it down somewhere. And so what I decided was, let's really take a look at where can I enter this field and make a difference without, pulling fire alarms all day long. And what I learned is that it's not about the meds. It's not about the diagnosis, not about big pharma. It's not about insurance companies. It's not about doctors. It's not about prescriptions. What it's about then, what is it about? What it's about is that we are convinced that there's something wrong with us. And that's when we enter the system. You see, we would never enter the system if we didn't think there was something wrong with us. And then we wouldn't have to go through all these crazy changes. So the idea of really helping people see all of a sudden, maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe this is a crazy world. And, I saw this Krishnamurti quote that says, it's no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And I was like, that's so solid, so true. And we don't blame a log for burning in a fire. It says I use that. And it's since 2006, I've really been, morphing. I decided to close down my practice and just take as many people as I could off of medicine and see how they do. And people did just way, way better. And, my practice shrunk. And then I started being a locum tenens, someone who travels around the country, filling up spots of where missing doctors who have died or been fired or quit or whatever. And I started seeing the system as being a generalized system that actually is very similar state to state to state, beyond similar, like identical, like the same shit is happening in every state, like whether it's private or public hospital, doesn't matter. It's the same shit is happening. Not in the hospitals only either, in all the facilities. So I got pretty proficient, like realizing, wow, I'm a national doctor now. Like I know how this whole stuff rolls in California, Illinois, Indiana, North Carolina, Michigan, Kentucky, like that. So I started to take my act worldwide. I went to Europe and France, England, Italy, Israel, Thailand, Bhutan. I did some psychiatric work from there and really continuing to establish what's the universal truth about humanity. What are we really doing? Because what I know is that someone who's schizophrenic in Kansas City might not be schizophrenic in Taiwan. Like, what the hell is that? If you have a broken arm in Kansas City, you got a broken arm in Singapore. If you have schizophrenia in Kansas City, you might not have schizophrenia in Little Rock, for God's sake. Like, you might not have schizophrenia with the doctor's office next door, actually. So these diagnoses are really nebulous. They're really nebulous. And I began to learn what I began to learn about the whole idea of, how these diagnoses ever got established and why would I ever hang my hat on giving someone a diagnosis anyways? By the way, I'm wearing a hat at this point. I changed my practice. My practice naturally went through some transitions, and I created Welcome to Humanity as my primary brand. This idea, it's now become pretty self-explanatory. What do I mean by that? That the only condition all of us have is a human condition. That's it. You don't have another psychiatric diagnosis, except for stuff that people made up that then the person agreed to take on. It's not a diagnosis until you agree to take it on, by the way. Because if I call you an elephant, that you're not going to accept that as a diagnosis until you say, Dr. Moss told me an elephant and I'm an elephant. I was like, okay, now you're an elephant. You're right. We just agreed. But until you agree to take on the diagnosis that some clinician gives you, you don't even have a diagnosis. Now, when you go to the diagnostician, when you go to a clinic, what most people don't realize is you automatically get a diagnosis every single visit. And it sticks with you forever. Like it's non-erasable. There's no clinician who can come in after a diagnosis and erase a previous diagnosis. You can't do that. You can override it. You can give another diagnosis, but the first one will be with you the whole time. And what's the power of a diagnosis? Well, the power of a diagnosis is it gives you a right to relinquish responsibility for the parts of your life that you're not very proud of. The things that are bumbling, stumbling, tumbling, the things where you're making mistakes, where you're angry too often, where you're impulsive, you're afraid, you're sad, you're scared. Those things, if you can put them in a packet and give them an alphabet soup diagnostic acronym, then you're in. Like, yay, I got ADHD. Yay, I got PTSD. Yeah, I got MDD. I got BAD. I got BPD. I got blah, 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 whatever. And it's not like, look, if having a diagnosis and your treatment plan and your medications and your therapy is working for you and you wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, by all means, please keep doing that. I'm not even kidding. Like, of course, if you've reached that level in any area of your life where you can't even consider an upgrade, please continue doing that. Of course, that's a magical place to be. I'm not speaking to you about needing to change your regimen. It's fine. This is for the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not even tens of millions of people who already know that the system is failing them. They already know that they're not getting the treatment they deserve. They already know that they're overprescribed, underprescribed, overmedicated, and undermedicated, overdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, whatever they are, and that the system has not served them up with the kind of due respect that they deserve in their pursuit of freedom and power and, you know, peace and general tranquility or general alignment anyways. This is the conversation that I have. And so I've created many things. Like you said, Find Your True Voice is a book that I wrote. It's a pretty cool book, easy read. You can get it for free. I'll be glad to give you that site. That's at findyourtruevoicebook.com, where, shipping, handling only. And then another book I wrote called Creative 8, realizing that when we are creative in the act of creativity, art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, our symptoms go away. The so-called symptoms that we thought that we had actually go away during the act of creativity. And so we can even do any one of those things for like 1 minute. And during that process, much relief happens from the idea that we thought we were like disempowered with some sort of depression, anxiety, fear, etc. What's really important to forget about that is when our symptoms go away and then we stop being creative, we have a choice at that moment to continue down the road without symptoms. We can. Or we could choose to back up into a previous belief that we have depression waiting for us in the corner, and we might as well go find ourselves our depression again and get all locked up in our depression. It's not absolutely necessary. Once you've been relieved, you're actually out of the cage, and you theoretically could be able to continue taking on a life in an entirely different way than the past that brought you up to now. In other words, your next action is not dictated by the habits that brought you to this very moment. Not at all. You're allowed to say, be, and do someone different as of right now, even if it feels like you have habits. Okay, so you have habits. That still doesn't deflect from the possibility of creating something new from right now. By making statements and changing your actions and actually thinking new thoughts, it becomes available to live in a world of significantly difficult circumstances, feelings, emotions, sensations, etc., and still live a life that is different than the one that you've been taking on up until now. It's always possible. So the new paradigm really looks at that, really looks at, well, how do we take on this idea of life, the incredibly challenging, obstacle-filled, hurdle-filled aspect of life, and move forward in a way that's powerful from a grounded sense of genuine, authentic core values, like who we are for real, like what is this person that's sitting underneath us all? Like, and how can I step forward into making a difference in the world and actually living a world that works, even despite massive discomfort at times. So discomfort does not equal pathology. If you're uncomfortable in this world, welcome to humanity. Seriously. Like if you're not uncomfortable in this world, that's because you're dead. If you haven't faced discomfort yet today, You are in the outlying resources for sure. Almost everybody, if not everybody, has already had discomfort just about an hour after they wake up, or even less in most cases. Like I have discomfort like instantaneously upon waking up that I have to deal with right away every day. And it's not that fun to be alive sometimes. It's very difficult to be alive. Let's recognize that. We start from the same ground, which is this ground of realizing it's the human condition to be uncomfortable, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. And it doesn't mean you have to run to a doctor thinking there's something wrong with you. Each and every one of us is pretty sure there's something wrong with us. It still doesn't mean you have to run to a doctor, because all a doctor's going to do is going to give you that acronym, going to give you some diagnosis, going to give you some treatment plan and some sort of medications, which may go so far as to relieve, at least temporarily, what you thought your symptoms were. But, I use one final analogy, I think, and then we can move forward. But, the analogy about the symptoms that I'm talking about is if you had a mosquito bite on your elbow, let's say you had a really gnarly mosquito bite on your elbow and you wanted to have it, like removed. And you're like, Dr. Moss, I need a referral for my mosquito bite on my elbow. I'm like, I know somebody in your area who's an expert, like who 100% cure rate. He's like, oh, cool. Let's go do it, because this thing's driving me nuts. And you go to his office, I give you his phone number and his address, and you go to his office and he meets you at the door, and he's got a pristine white office with some prints in the building, and he's got his, his diplomas and a sliding desk or glass window with a receptionist and the computer banging away behind, and there's a schedule book and the billing codes and all that. And he walks you into his back office wearing his white coat and his embroidered name and a stethoscope and a reflex hammer. He got the whole thing going on. And he asks you who you are, and you tell him, I just was sent here by Dr. Fred. And, oh yeah, you're the mosquito bite person. Yeah, come on in. I'm the expert in the world on this. Said, okay, cool. And he asks you to kind of show him your elbow, and you pull up your elbow and show him there's a bump there. He pulls out his magnifying glass and he takes a look. Yeah, you got a mosquito bite there. And you're like, yeah, that's why I'm here. Well, I take care of these, 100% cure rate. So, and you're like, okay, let's go. I'm in. And he says, okay, well, he says something that doctors sometimes say, which is, it's only going to hurt for a minute. You're like, okay, I can handle a minute. You've done other patients. Let's go. And he takes out a saw and cuts off your arm at the shoulder. And then he tells you, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take a look at whether that mosquito bite has come back. So you come back in 2 weeks, there's no mosquito bite. There's no elbow, there's no arm. But if you stay myopic enough, that's a cure. And that's the kind of damage that these medicines do. They do a damage not to the mosquito bite, to your ability to even feel anything. And that's what's happening. You give up so much in your effort to get rid of that one symptom. The capacity of what you end up giving up is so large, and whether or not there are so-called side effects. I don't like using side effects because it assumes that there's something that isn't a side effect, and it assumes that the medicine belongs in some level except for the side effects. I'm not there at all. So, but whatever you have whatever effects that have you then have to generally be put on additional medicines or increased medicines or more medicines the whole process is a self-fulfilling prophecy that is in fact the best business model ever created by any business in the history of time. This idea of when you can create a product that actually creates the need to buy the product, you've done a really good job in your business model. And the likelihood is that you would have $1 billion a day eventually in profit margin. And indeed, that's exactly what we're looking at. Profit margin of well over billions of dollars per day. Profit margin now. And, the distance between expenses and revenue. And, it's a sick system. It's a sick system. And how do I know that? Because if it wasn't sick, then the fact that 1/3 of every human being is now on a psychiatric medicine would make the world a healthier place. But as I look around, I'm not convinced that the world is a healthier place based on psychiatric medicines at all. So it's time to really take a look at that. Not only as medicines are not the evil. Medicines, just like rat poison, they just exist. It's okay. You don't have to eat them. If you eat them, now you got troubles. If you actually take on the diagnosis, agree to the diagnosis that some clinician gave you, and then start eating medicine, now you're going to have that chemical imbalance that you thought you had before, because now it's a forced chemical imbalance, and in fact does change your mood, change your thinking, change your behavior. And now you have the perpetuation of the symptoms it was marketed to treat. And I'm taking a stand in that. The idea is we have an alternative. It's okay that all that's happening. It's really okay that people are using it. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with doctors prescribing it. I'm okay with insurance companies supporting it. I'm okay with the pharma making it. I'm okay with all of that, because ultimately it's our decision. We get to decide whether there's something wrong with us to the point that we should go there and have ourselves, sliced open with these chemical imbalance creators called medicines, and believe that the system is there to help us, when in fact it's very clear that we're not getting the help that we deserve with that industry.
Okay, lots to unpack there in what you've talked about, and I definitely can relate to a lot of it. I mean, a lot of people don't know that I myself, when I went to college, I was convinced I actually knew what I wanted to do from when I was a teenager. I wanted to help people. I wanted to talk to people about their problems, and I wanted to be there for people who felt very alone in their suffering. And I thought, because my dad was an MD doctor, that was the route to go, and that I was going to be a psychiatrist. And I went all the way through pre-med in college in organic chemistry, which is the worst class ever. And then had my first internship working at a group home for adolescent boys with challenges, and saw what the psychiatrists were doing.
Which city were you in?
I was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Wow, that's awesome. So yeah, you were like a MIT area. That's really
I was going to Dartmouth, and I took a term off and did this internship at a facility for these boys. And I saw the psychiatrists, all they did, they met for 10-15 minutes. They gave diagnoses, and they wrote prescriptions. And I was like, where's the therapy? Where's the talking? Where's the helping people not feel alone in their suffering? And realized, oh my God, this whole industry. That's when I realized that, yes, psychiatry had moved away from Freud's kind of original concept to this biological, pharmaceutical, pathology-based model that wasn't even looking at anyone's strengths, was just looking at what's wrong with them, right? That's the whole premise. So then that's when I changed course and decided to go to grad school for psychology, and furthermore to go into transpersonal psychology, because I also realized it isn't just about talking. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. That was a huge part of what I understood later on. That was my role, is to help people try to find meaning and purpose in life, and all the things. So all that being said, I do want to break down some of the myths I think that people have. A lot of people assume that a psychiatric diagnosis, is a hard and fast fact, as if it's something like diabetes that you could go and get a blood test for and definitively find out if you have it or not. Can you please debunk that for us?
Yeah, there's no way that it's fact. I mean, that's just the bottom line. This is a group of people that got together to create the DSM-1 and 2 way back in the day, that had nothing to do with clinicians, nothing to do with creating anything, only in creating conversation about what it is that these groups of people might or might not have. It wasn't intended to be the biblical statistical manual that it eventually became. And the diagnoses are just made up along the way. I've been there to watch many new diagnoses show up out of nowhere. They didn't exist beforehand, and they often show up after the medicine is actually introduced, which is also very interesting. The medicine gets introduced, and then the diagnosis to match the medicine is actually created. So they realize what the medicine does, and then create a diagnosis that allows you to enter the system to get those symptoms perpetuated. So in fact, we start looking at this. If you go doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, if you decide to go doctor to doctor and actually present yourself in a similar or same enough way, you'll likely get multiple different diagnoses. And then you'll be able to walk out of those diagnoses and say, I have ADHD, I have bipolar disorder, I have borderline traits, and I have generalized anxiety disorder. It's like, no, you don't. You've seen 4 different psychiatrists is all that's happened. You don't have any of those things. You have 4 different opinions that you've agreed to take on. So if we start looking at these diagnoses, the other thing is, I read recently, and I really agree with this, Any adult human in the Western world right now can earn the diagnosis of attention deficit disorder. It's just not hard. Any adult can earn that diagnosis. In fact, we don't know what non-attention deficit disorder even looks like. We don't have a definition for that. So the only people who are getting ADD diagnoses are the people who want them, like for whatever reason. If you want to be labeled, if you want to say the reason I didn't finish my work on time, boss, is because I have ADHD, or the reason I multitask too much is because I have ADHD. The reason I can't keep track of my calendar is because I have ADHD. No. The reason you can't do that stuff is because you're human, and it's coming at us so fast that we cannot keep our traits, our mind straight. And so, of course, we're distractible. It's not a deficit and it's not a disorder. So both of those D's go away. Yes, you have attention issues, but so do we all. They're coming at us at full speed to rip up our distractibility. And it's the same thing with depression. You have a choice. You really do have it. People don't like hearing this. People like thinking that, no, I have depression and therefore I'm incapable. It's not really true. It's not really true, I promise. None of us are inherently capable. The truth is you have to step forward and do stuff, or talk to stuff, or be with people, or take on your thoughts and feelings, ideas, emotions, sensations, etc., circumstances. In fact, there's an escape from your depression. Now, the truth is, what do you have to do? You might have to redesign or refine your mindset. In meditation, gratitude, nutrition, hydration, creativity, spirituality, being of service, pampering yourself, going out in nature, being with your pets, having authentic conversations, writing, reading, all those things that are here go a long ways. Detoxification, movement. These things we already know them. They're time tested and proven. And if you are walking around with a diagnosis, some sort of acronym diagnosis that you've decided to take on for yourself, it does not preclude you from doing those things. You could do any of them. And I promise the more of those that you did, your life would become refined. Your life would become improved. You may even find yourself feeling healed, especially in the world of human connection. When you actually are able to connect with another person, that is the magic sauce. And that's what we're really looking for. Isn't that what love is, after all? Isn't that why podcasts exist, after all? The whole idea is you fall in love with somebody who you think connects and understands you. That's the whole point. If someone actually can relate to you, that's called love. And don't we already know that love is what makes the world go round, and all you need is love and all that? We already know that. So human connection is the purity of the essence of curing and healing. And I like to encourage people to go that direction. Now, when you start taking medicines, by the way, that gets muted, that gets smothered a little bit, that gets a little bit, impure. And so your ability to communicate effectively actually does go down, and you may not even notice it from inside of yourself. But the truth is, the cleaner, the purer, the more present that you are, the more courageous that you take on all the things that are difficult in life and be willing to embrace even the nearly impossible, unspeakable things of life. That's when you're going to get your best chance to get the GPS, the information it needs to know where you are so that you actually can go where you're going. And what we're really talking about is, the pursuit of pure and honest, real communication through getting yourself standard, getting yourself genuine and rooted, getting yourself authentic and honest, and then communicating that self with others. There's so many of us who have now learned to become someone that we're not in order to protect the person that we are. Hear me. That's how peculiar how insane is that, to actually become someone that you're not in order to protect the person that you are? It's a ludicrous, preposterous, absurd management strategy. Yet we all know that we do it sometimes just in order to stay in the crowd and not be dismissed, or, not be disenfranchised. And so what we really are looking for is being pure to yourself, being real about the world, seeing that we don't even know what normal is. And if we don't even know what normal is, how in the world do we have the audacity to call anybody abnormal?
So two things that I want to highlight there. You said the word authenticity and connection,
Yeah.
and I think that that is the true value in therapy or counseling or coaching is very much that it's that connection, feeling like you're safe enough to be your authentic self and safe enough to express whatever's on your mind, even if it's dark and painful, and to feel seen and heard by another human being. I mean, I love, Dr. Gabor Mate's work, right? I specialize in addiction. And he talks about how really at the core of addiction is this disconnection, this social isolation, this disconnection from other human beings, and that the healing needs to happen in that context of connection or communication, as you say. And again, it's like, it's funny. It reminds me of a psychiatrist I knew early on in my career who said, yeah, we can write all the prescriptions, but without the therapy, like, change is probably unlikely to occur. And I thought that that was really significant. So thank you for speaking to that. I also want to dispel another myth about, you referenced it earlier, but I want to use a specific term called the placebo effect. And I think the placebo effect here applies in multiple ways to what you're talking about. Certainly, we have the placebo effect of the medications themselves. I'd like you to maybe share a little bit about that, because I know there's even research that supports this. But also, I think when you talk about taking on the identity of a certain pathology or a disorder, that in itself is a placebo effect. If I believe that I'm bipolar, then I'm probably going to start creating mood swings and all the things. So
Yeah.
can you say a little bit more about that?
About which one did you like me to take on?
Let's talk about the actual placebo effect that's been documented about these medications.
Yeah.
And I think you've spoken about the identity of pathology, but wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah. So the actual placebo effect, the thing is that these drugs, I wish that they were neutral. I wish that all they did was a Band-Aid. I wish they didn't make you worse. If they didn't make you worse, I wouldn't be on my high horse. I'm okay about putting a Band-Aid on a cut. I'm good. I'm not okay about putting a Band-Aid on a cut that has a razor blade embedded in it. And that's what these medicines really are. So can you get better, nevertheless, if you think you're going to get better taking a Band-Aid with a razor blade in it? I guess so. If you really want to believe you're going to get better, then I guess you're going to get better. And you're going to what happens when you let's say I have a cut on my hand here, and I put a Band-Aid on it. It's got a hidden razor blade in it. For a moment, my cut bleeding will stop. Like, it'll look like, yeah, we got this. And then it'll start oozing out the side of the Band-Aid. And then I have a few choices. The only three choices that any of us psychopharmacologists really have, which is to add, increase, or change the Band-Aid. That's it. Those are my only three choices. Add another Band-Aid. Increase, increase the size of the Band-Aid. Or change, try a whole new kind of Band-Aid. That's all I have. Rather than assuming or getting the truth that the Band-Aid itself is causing the perpetuation of the cut. When we start looking at that, we can start seeing there's a whole new truth. That's why discontinuation or even reduction isn't in our wheelhouse as a real choice. Sometimes we reduce. We think that we're reducing to deal with one of those things I called earlier, a side effect. But in general, we don't ever blame the medicines for causing the symptoms, because we really believe we came to the doctor with the original symptoms and that all this is a recurrent of that. It's not a recurrence of that. It's the creation of a new set of symptoms caused by the Band-Aid. When we start really realizing that, of course, that's a beautiful business model. You can't even blame the company that created that. It's like brilliant. I wish I would have created it. I'd be living in the hills somewhere. It's awesome. But when we really start looking at it and looking at the placebo effect, for instance, I would even add that you don't have to be a therapist to be that person that you're talking about. The person who listens to somebody, or a person who hears somebody, or a person who connects with somebody. It does not require a college degree at all, not even close. It doesn't even require education. It doesn't require anything. It requires your humanity. You can find somebody who's completely undereducated and completely capable of being that person for you. No problem. You do not have to have a PhD or an MD or an MS or whatever you think you have that's now catapulted you into being a so-called connector. Not required. There might be people out there who have that job who are capable of doing it. That's fair. But you can be with friends or family or colleagues or even the clerk at Kroger's, and you can get that done. Just somebody who you can connect with. So when we start looking at at what's really here inside of the world of, diagnoses and this idea of, like someone comes to the doctor and they say, doctor, I have gray mottled skin. I have too big of a nose. I'm addicted to water. I eat too many peanuts. And I'm a mess in a china shop. And the doctor goes through his DSM-17 and he's like, well, let me take a look here. And he said, you're an elephant. And you're like, cool. I never thought about that before. And now you bring elephant. This is what you were kind of saying. You bring elephant into your world. And when you leave that office now knowing that you are an elephant, you start walking like an elephant. You start thinking like you like walk out of the office looking for circuses and chains. You're like, that's what I do. I'm an elephant. And you go home with a new smile, having now been categorized as reasons to be as awkward as you are. You tell your family, I went to the specialist today. I learned what was wrong with me. What's that? You're an elephant. No. Or I'm an elephant. No, actually, you're not. It's sorry to hear it. And you're like, you feel bad for them for not even realizing that you're an elephant. And then you start worrying about them because they're in your family. They have the same genetics. Perhaps they have some elephant, qualifications as well. You want to get them aware, but you're not going to be disconnected from the idea that you're an elephant anytime soon. This is your real world. Then you come back in a couple of weeks, you say, I've got a couple of new symptoms I noticed. I have a really great memory, and I got these really huge ears. And they say, oh, you're elephant type 2. You're a rare breed. And you're really excited now, too, because you got something a little bit different than the average one. Like, I got an extreme case of elephant. This is how we manage psychiatric diagnoses. It's the only field that I know of in all of medicine and maybe anywhere that if you tell the client that they're normal, they get pissed. They didn't come here to hear that they're normal. They didn't come there to figure if there's something wrong with them. They came here for the label to define that which they have already determined is wrong with them.
Oh, and right on that leads me to, that's a good place to ask this question because we're seeing so many young people, kids and young adults on the socials self-diagnosing. Now they've decided they have ADHD and autism and borderline, and it's suddenly become popular to have all these different diagnoses.
Sure.
And now these kids are showing up even in treatment saying, I have this, that, and the other. Well, who gave you that diagnosis? Oh, well, I did. Or I was watching TikTok videos and that's how I figured it out. Can you speak? What do you think is driving that with these kids?
People, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter whether they self-diagnosed it or they just agreed with a clinician who gave it to them. They're the same things. It doesn't matter whether they read about it or they heard about it from somebody with a white coat. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make it more real. Let's make that very clear. It's not more real when someone else gives it to you than if you made it up. They're actually very close to the same, because it doesn't even become a diagnosis until you agree that you have it. So once you have this diagnosis thing, then you think that there's a formalized treatment plan waiting for you. And the formalized treatment plan might include therapy, might include medicine, might include, inpatient, might include partial hospital, I don't know, might include something. And when you start getting those things, it actually reconfirms the original diagnosis for its own existence. And when that happens, that's when you take on the identity of the diagnoses, the acronymic idea of being on the spectrum or being, narcissistic or being schizophrenic or being anxious or whatever you think, clinical depression, people throw that one out as if that's a separation from something. It's funny, these diagnoses are so fabricated, yet they have made their way into our real training, into our real programming as being real. So I have to be a little bit careful when I speak even this openly about this. People because people lock into their diagnoses. It allows them to actually explain why they can continue to make foolish decisions in their life. I'm not calling them fools, by the way. Us humans, we make foolish decisions in our life. Hello, we do. Even us really smart ones, we are clumsy in life. There's no one out there who's not clumsy in life. There is no recipe book. There's no instruction manual. There's no one who had really taught us how to, unless you want to act like you're somebody else again. And then we go back to that absurdity of acting like you're somebody else in order to protect the person that you are. And we really start looking how diagnoses serve a purpose to allow me to relinquish certain components of my life that I'm not proud of. And once I have that diagnosis, I can tell my wife, if I get mad at her, I scream at, oh, honey, that wasn't me. That was like flare up of my bipolar. Honey, that was, why did I not come home for dinner? I had ADHD after work. Oh, really? We get to do that with these diagnoses, and they really do. They're very comfortable, they're self-perpetuating. It's very interesting. Look, if I could blame you for all the mistakes that I've already made today, I would do that in a second. I don't want to take on the responsibility for the bullcrap that I've already had every single day. But if I can give it to you or parcel it out to a diagnosis, yeah, that's pretty exciting. Now all of a sudden I'm kind of freed up from the responsibility. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. No, it's disempowering. I mean, that's what you're saying. It's disempowering to people when you give your power of choice away to a diagnosis. It's because of the diagnosis that I did this, that, or the other. Yeah. Okay. I have one last question for you because I know our time is running low. What is your vision? What would you like to see as the future of mental health care in our country or the world or anywhere?
Well, I recently wrote a book, and it's in the second proof and second edit, so it'll be out, I suppose, in maybe it's being promised in like 4 weeks. And the book is called Welcome to Humanity, and it's about my memoirs. It's about 39 personal stories and a psychiatrist's view about the mental health system. I'm really proud of the book. I can't wait till it comes out. I'm loving how it's unfolding, and that will be available on Amazon as well. Look, we got to break this thing down. If we're gonna get we need to have honest and open, genuine, authentic conversations with each other to take on any of the world problems. And at this point in time, we're not having those. And because we're not having those, things continue to break down. So ultimately, if we don't really elevate the need to communicate to people whether or not you agree with them on particular issues, if we don't move communication and connection to the center of the universe, then we're not going in. We're fried. It's over. Like, put a fork in it. We're done. It's the end of humanity. If we keep eating Seroquel and Prozac and Depakote, and that's also the end of humanity. That's not going to get us anything. There's nothing there. So what I'm really hoping for is maybe, and I say it I just kind of be real careful, at least a deep and total transformation of the prevailing conventional conversation that presently surrounds mental health, like a full transformation, a full foundational transformation of the prevailing conversation that presently dominates mental health and moves it back into communication where perhaps you don't even need to go to a doctor. It's okay to be miserable. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's okay to be in a lot of pain. It is psychological pain. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It's okay to be totally confused, to be aimless, to be sad, even to be suicidal. All those things are part of the human experience. It doesn't mean that I'm okaying with you cutting your wrist or jumping off a bridge. It's okay to have these feelings because we're all aware of them. And when you have those feelings and you can share it with another, it is profound and magical how instantaneous healing takes place. No side effects, no authorization, no insurance, no prescription, no purchases, no pharmacies, nothing like that. Right then and there, massive growth and healing takes place when I can get to be in a place with another so that we feel like we can hear and see each other.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for this conversation. Dr. Fred, if people want to find out more about you and your work, where should they go?
Yeah, so the best place to go, I have a couple different websites. The primary website, the slickest website is drfred360.com. And there you can see everything I'm doing, from my podcast to my courses, to my books, to my speaking engagements, to my coaching and all that. There's freebies there, and you can get access to all the things I've ever done. And that's a clone in some ways of my old website, the mothership, called welcometohumanity.net. And then I troll around on the social media a little bit. I spend too many minutes in Facebook, and sometimes that goes to hours, and I'm embarrassed about that. I wish that wasn't true, but my distractibility is up for grabs, just like yours is. And I like LinkedIn fairly well. And then, I have this retreat coming up. So this retreat is super fun, and I invite people to look at welcometohumanityretreat.com. And that's a place where we're bringing people like you, people who have actually contributed to the world, who want to make a difference, who are not coming to the retreat to be a participant. They're coming to a retreat almost like a symposium, like a mastermind, a think tank for clinicians like us, who have been putting out and feeling the world for what it is, and maybe not getting their share. And so I invite people to be part of that retreat. If you're not ready if you don't need anything for yourself, but you're ready to show people what you do, you're going to be with 23 other people who are showing you what they do. And so you will naturally get all sorts of goods from the people in the group, but you're not coming to receive. You're coming to give at your very best and to show people what you have. So that retreat is in Charlotte in September 17th to 20th. And we're accepting people still with the early bird pricing. And I invite people to look at that website as well.
Excellent. And we'll be sure to add links. Everything you talked about, we'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Fred. Thank you so much, audience. If you've liked what you've heard today, please do like, share, subscribe, rate, review, all the things that will help this podcast get out there in the hands of the people who are really searching for this information. Thanks so much again. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.